Prynhawn da i chi gyd, gobeithio eich bod i gyd yn cadw'n dda, a diolch yn fawr i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein gwefan heddi i baratoi i ddarparu'r cymhwyster sylfaen gan edrych yn benodol ar Galwedigaethau Toi. Rydym i gyd yn gweithio adre, felly ymddeiriadau o flaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. Good afternoon to you all and hope you're all keeping well. And thank you very much for joining us on our webinar on how to prepare to deliver the foundation qualification, looking specifically on roofing occupations. As we are all working from home, I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost cyn diwedd y webinar gyda link i'n harolwg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn petai chi'n cymeryd yr amser i lenwi hwn. Mae eich adborth yn werthfawr iawn i ni. You will receive an email before the session ends with a link to a survey. We would be very grateful if you could take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Dyma beth byddwn ni'n trafod prynhawn yma. Fe fyddwn edrych ar y drawsnewidiad a chynnwys y gymhwyster sylfaen, strwythur yr unedau, ac yn rhoi amlinelliad o'r asesiadau. Byddwn yn edrych ar yr adnoddau sydd ar gael i chi, yna ymlaen i'r camau nesaf, ac i gau cyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiynau i ni. Plis rhowch eich cwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar llawr dde o'ch sgrin. Gobeithio bydd gennym digon o amser ar ddiwedd y webinar i ateb gymaint o gwestiynau ag y gallwn. Fe fydd y cwestiynau a'r atebion yn cael eu rhoi ar wefan Sgiliau i Gymru. Mae'r sesiwn wedi'i gynllunio am awr a hanner, gyda'r cyflwyniad yn cymeryd tua 40 munud. This is what we'll be discussing this afternoon. We will be going over the transformation of these new qualifications. We will look at the foundation qualification content, looking specifically on roofing occupations. We will look at the structure of the unit and outline of the assessments. We will then take a look at the resources that will be available for you, and then on to the next steps. And then you will have an opportunity to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions that you have throughout this webinar in the Questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. The questions and answers will be on the Skills for Wales website. The session is planned for an hour and a half, with the presentation lasting around 40 minutes. Dyma I chi eich cyflwynwyr heddi. Here are your presenters today. Mae David Pye gyda ni. David yw cynghorydd technegol gwasanaethau adeiladu I City and Guilds. We have David Pye, who's the lead technical advisor for building services at City and Guilds. Mae Ian Roberts gyda ni. Ian yw cynghorydd technegol adeiladu I City and Guilds. Ian Roberts, who's the technical advisor for construction at City and Guilds. A fi, sef Angharad Lloyd Bainan, fi yw eich rheolwr busnes I City and Guilds ar gyfer Cymru, and myself, Angharad Lloyd Bainan, who's the business manager for Wales at City and Guilds. Nawr, fe gen ni Paul sydyn I wybod am eich ddealltwriaeth chi am y cymwysterau newydd yma. Now, we will have a quick poll to get your understanding of the new qualifications. Felly, sut byddech yn ddisgrifio eich dealltwriaeth o'r cymhwyster sylfaen gan feddwl am Galwedigaethau Toi? Plis rhowch eich ateb gyda 5 lefel ucha o ddealltwriaeth. Therefore, how would you rate your understanding of the foundation qualification, thinking particularly about the roofing occupations? Please select a number from 1 to 5, with 5 giving it the highest level of understanding. Rwy'n mi ychydig o eiliadau I chi gael cyfle I roi eich ateb. Give you just a few more seconds for you to have a chance to put your answer in. Grêt, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Hwna'n ddiddorol iawn i weld yr atebion. Felly gobeithio ffynwy byddwch chi'n a gwell dieddwriaeth erbyn diwedd y webinar. Thank you very much to you all. Very interesting to see the results there, and I'm sure you will have a greater understanding about the qualifications after this webinar. Hoffwn nawr eich troslwyddo i David Pye, a fydd yn eich tywysg trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to David Pye, who will take you through the next slides. Diolch, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Harriet, and welcome everyone. I hope you're all safe and well. Start by having a bit of a recap over the sector review. I'm sure many of you are aware of the driver for change, but as a recap, or for those who are not aware, let's take a quick look at this slide. The 2018 review, named Building the Futures, set the framework for change. The review concentrated on qualifications and their processes in the wider construction industry. The review included many discussions with various stakeholders, including employers. In brief, to meet the skills needs of Wales, the outcomes were as follows: reducing the number of qualifications, providing clear progression routes, and having portability within Wales and beyond. Now let's move on to some of that stakeholder engagement we've just mentioned. Here we've provided a brief overview of the stakeholders that have helped develop and shape the content we have created. They include employers, including micro businesses, medium and large contractors, current practitioners across the sector. So hopefully you can see these qualifications have been developed with your peers who have experience of delivering qualifications and resources that are required. Now let's have a look at the foundation qualification. The foundation qualification that we're covering in this webinar is seen as the entry point for learners who wish to start their journey towards occupational competence in the construction or building services engineering trade. The diagram shows the various learner journeys through the new suite of qualifications and how the foundation is the starting point. Let's start by having a look at Learner A. So Learner A starts as a full-time learner on the foundation qualification, and then after the first year secures employment and starts their apprenticeship level 3 qualification. Whereas Learner B, here we can see they commence as a full-time learner on the foundation qualification, and then, due to not being able to secure employment, return to continue as a second year full-time progression qualification. Whereas Learner C has been successful in gaining employment as an apprentice and will therefore work towards a core qualification, which is the mandatory foundation units plus 1 trade unit, and then continue their education as an apprentice. So just to try and help explain Learner C there, the core qualification mirrors the foundation qualification, but as we've said, this is only one trade area. I hope that helps set the context for this foundation webinar. Hope it gives you a bit of background and helps, as I say, set the context. As Ian presents the next section, I'll be working through all the questions in the questions tab. So I can try to answer your questions as Ian presents on any of the background, any of the queries that Ian may be raising as part of his section, any questions that you've got, any concerns or worries, or just some feedback. Please put them into the questions tab. I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can as we work through. So at this point, I'd like to hand you back to Ian, who'll take you through the next section.
Thank you, David and Harrod, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So here I'm going to start by providing an overview of the foundation qualification, and specifically on the roofing occupation. The first document I would like to draw your attention to is the qualification handbook. It is always the starting point when considering the content, the depth and the understanding of the unit structure. The handbook is available from the Skills for Wales website, and the link is immediately on this slide at the bottom end. When you look at the handbook, you will see the 6 core units, which are unit numbered 101 to 106, and are assessed via an on-screen exam, and a range of trade-specific units to achieve the foundation in construction and building services level 2. Although a level 2 qualification, this is seen as the entry point for most learners, as it is a broad offer that leads on to trade-specific progression qualifications. The next document we will consider during this presentation is the assessment pack, which again is on the Skills for Wales website. This is broken down into sections. Section 2 is for the learner, and sections 3, 4 and 5 for the assessor, and as you can see, section 3 covers the on-screen assessment. Section 4 covers the practical project, and section 5 the guided discussion. Just to reinforce again, the link to the document once you receive this presentation is located on the slide. The rules of combination for the foundation qualification are highlighted on this slide. For the foundation in construction and building services engineering, which is a level 2 qualification. There are 6 mandatory core units, which are numbers 101 to 106. And it's worth noting at this moment in time that if a learner commences on and is successful in gaining employment, will still cover the same core unit numbers as part of the first year of their route. And then we've got 2 optional trade-specific units that a learner on the foundation qualification and under the guidance of the centre will select from a total of 10 units covering the relevant trades. This is to allow learners to sample 2 trade areas and receive a broader understanding of the construction and building services engineering industry. During this presentation, and as we have mentioned earlier, we will be covering the roofing operations during today's webinar. Here we can see the total number of guided learning hours, which equates to 540. And there will be 3 methods of assessments, with the candidate having to achieve a pass grade or higher in all of the assessments. The total hours for the 6 core units totals of 198 guided learning hours. And the 2 trade units, which is 140 hours per trade unit, times that by your 2, which equates to 280 in total. And the final part of it is the assessments, which total 62, which gives you an overall total number of hours of 540. As shown on the previous slide, the total GLH is 540. And it's worth pointing out again that the total qualification time, including some self-study, reflection time, hours spent in preparation and formative assessments, equates to 600 hours in total. Here we can see all the core units, the unit numbered 101 to 106 on the left of the screen, their titles and the guided learning hours. The guided learning hours are to the right of the screen. The units we have selected for this webinar, which is roofing occupations, unit 111, you can see at the bottom of the screen. You will be familiar with much of the content in the 6 core units, as you have previously delivered units in current and previous construction qualifications. For example, covering health and safety, environmental impacts such as wastage of materials, introduction to other trades and emerging technologies. So I wouldn't expect staff to require much upskilling to be aware of the new unit structure and content. However, to support you through this, we will have a new foundation textbook, but more on this later. To meet the rules of combination and the 540 guided learning hours, learners and centres will need to select a second trade-specific unit. Here you can see the remaining trade areas that a learner will be able to select, provided the training provider can offer. In your planning, this will require some consideration with your timetabling and preparation for the assessments. Okay, I'd now like to take a little deeper dive into the actual units themselves. So now we're going to cover the structure of the unit. There can always be a temptation to look at assessments and then work backwards to delivery. But if we consider the qualification handbook and the details in the units, we will get a full outlook of the content to be delivered. The learning outcome is the overview. The assessment criteria starts to detail what outcome is expected for successful assessment. And the range indicates the breadth of knowledge and skills to be covered. All elements of the range must be covered in the delivery. The unit we have highlighted here is Unit 111, the roofing occupations. The top of the page will show the unit number and title, the level, which is a level 2, and the guided learning hours, which is 140. It then goes on to describe a brief overview of the unit. Immediately below, you will then see the learning outcomes, and in this instance, learning outcome 1, which is know the underlying principles used in roofing occupations. Following on, we can now see the learning outcome discussed on an earlier slide. And we're going to cover here is learning outcome 3 from Unit 111, install roof coverings is the title. When we look at 3.1, the criteria, we can see the heading, ensure a safe working environment. And the range is immediately beneath. When we then built to 3.2, prepare backgrounds, we could then ask, what does this cover? And this is where we consider the range, which is eave systems, calculate datum, and calculate gauge. Then we can ask what depth. The depth in the lower box describes further the expected outcomes. So let's have a look at 3.1, which states learners will be able to understand the importance of a site induction, recognise how to implement the outcomes, recognise different safety and signs, and have an understanding of COSH in relation to PPE and roofing tasks. Whether we look at a core or a trade-specific unit, you will see exactly the same design. To help reinforce this message from the previous slide, and to show how construction is considered in the core units, we will now take a look at Unit 102, which is Introduction to the Trades and the Construction and Built Environment sector. And as you can see, 30 guided learning hours are attached to this. At 1.1 and 1.2, you can see the same layout and structure with plenty of information to guide the depth of delivery. Considering the main activities of trades, as these outcomes will link into the learner project as it forms part of the planning task. So let's take a closer look now at the summary of assessments. The on-screen assessment covering the core units, which is units 101 to 106, is 70 minutes long and contains 45 multiple choice questions. It is recommended that this is taken prior to the actual practical and guided discussion. But the on-screen assessment is externally set and externally marked with an overall weighting of 20%. The practical project covering the two trade areas, again, is externally set and internally marked with a weighting of 60%. The guided discussion, which is a new method of assessment, is externally set and internally marked with a weighting of 20%. As many learners prefer hands-on experience, this weighting of assessments will identify and reward demonstrated skills within the practical project. We will be going through each method of assessment in the up and coming slides. But before we move on, I would like once again to reinforce we have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments, which can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. As I've mentioned earlier, the on-screen assessment does cover 70 minutes long, and it includes 45 questions which are multiple choice. The practical project is made up of 3 tasks that require the learner to plan, do, and evaluate. And this has to be taken before the guided discussion. The guided discussion contains 3 parts, including the learner's reflection. And this method of assessment, once again, is externally set, internally marked, and externally verified. And the guided discussion can only take place once the learner has completed the practical project. We are well aware that this is a new method of assessment that some people may be comfortable with, and other people may be thinking, are we going to receive any additional training to help us through this? And the answer to that is yes, you will receive additional support and guidance to help you through this, which we'll touch on later on in this presentation. I'd now like to go through the health and safety assessment, which is not part of the qualification. It is, however, to allow the learner to move forward in readiness to carry out the CSCS health and safety test to gain a CSCS card. And this can be taken at any stage of the assessment process. And what you will be looking at is, it will be a multiple choice test at the end, which is very similar to our 6072 Health and Safety Award. The 3 previous assessments, it's worth noting that they will be graded, passed through to distinction. I'd also like to make this comment is that although the health and safety assessment is not part of the qualification, the core unit also includes some health and safety, and so does the practical project. So the assessments as well for health and safety will also be drawn out through the core assessment, which is an online multiple choice test, and also through the practical project. Here we can see some examples of the questions from the on-screen test. Some are straightforward, multiple choice, some are drag and drop, and others are pictures, asking a learner to identify. This will be similar to what we do currently on many assessments, with the addition of a variety of question types. The test can be taken at any stage in the assessment process, although it is recommended that it is completed prior to the practical project and guided discussion. Excuse me. I'd now like to cover the practical project. And here you can see we broke it down into 3 sections. We understand that this will be a new approach to assessment, but it uses many similar approaches we have used in different previous assessments, particularly when we consider the design type assessments and practicals with supporting evidence such as materials lists and gap paragraphs. So whilst it's a new title, the approach will be familiar. The first section is the planning, which is made up of 5 tasks. These are the same tasks regardless of trade area. The approach will be the same, but the content would differ depending on the trade selected. The time allocated to planning is 15 hours. Excuse me. Time gained cannot be used for other parts of the assessment.
You okay, Ian? Do you need a glass of water?
I just need a quick minute. Just one moment. Right. Thank you. Sorry about that. We'll just move on. The second section is the practical. And the time allocated is 20 hours for each trade. Learners will use their own materials list, method statements, etc. that they created in their planning. So links directly to their practical and the review section. Practical and the review section has 5 hours allocated. They will link their own planning to their project as part of this review. So the learner will reflect on how their planning linked to practical and how they met their objectives and their general performance.
You okay, Ian? Bear with us a moment. It sounds as though Ian's got to go and get a glass of water. Ian's actually controlling the slides as well. So whilst Ian's getting a glass of water, if you want to think of any of the questions that you have, again, please use the questions tab and I'll try and answer those for you as you're ongoing.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Here we can see to the right of the project, the sample assessment, which is asking the learner to cover the main roof areas with underlay, battens and concrete interlocking format tiles to set sizes. No doubt you are familiar with this type of assessment. The use of the various materials will bring together different skills from across the unique content and tie in with the previous planning activity the learners have completed. To accompany the diagram, there is also on the left a specification for materials, etc. These sample assessments are available from the Skills for Wales website, so please take a look if you haven't done so already. Continuing from the previous slide, which referred to roofing occupations, you can see on the left of the screen the materials and tools list. There will be an overview materials list for the centres to help plan and prepare. But this isn't to be shared with the learner, as they will make their own as part of their planning activity. The right-hand side of the slide shows the marking grid. This grid helps us to grade the learner as we use the tolerances to apply the marks, such as within 5 millimeters for 3 marks, and this is an approach used in some previous qualifications, so should be familiar to assessors, but if not, it's a fairly straightforward method and is similar to the approach on Wales skills competitions. The guided discussion will explore learner knowledge of the wider construction sector, including one of their chosen trade areas, and will link the planning to the practical reviewing of their own performance. The method of assessment is externally set, internally marked, and externally verified, and 40 minutes is allocated. We will take a deeper dive into the guided discussion as an assessment method in future dedicated sessions. So please look out for the future webinars and possibly face-to-face sessions should restrictions reduce in future. So here's an overview of the assessments we have briefly covered for the foundation qualification. But let's focus on the summary. Learners will receive provisional grades for the assessments within 1 week of completion. Qualifications will undergo internal and external quality assurance, and the final grading will be issued by City and Guilds, as City and Guilds is the awarding organisation for the foundation qualification. It's worth noting the slight change in procedure to current qualifications. This is to enable us to quality assure and calculate the grading based on results across all 3 assessments. If a learner fails to successfully achieve a pass grade in any of the assessments, then they are permitted to resit, submit, and there are no limits to reassessments. However, what you have to consider is time may become an issue, as learners will require further training and reinforcement prior to further attempts. I'd now like to go through, and this is a quick overview of our resources And just a gentle reminder before I commence is that all the resources will be in the Welsh language as well as.
I can cover these, Ian.
Thank you, David.
So here we have a prospectus document, and this is available on the Skills for Wales website to help centres with their promotional literature. We also have an overview resources document to provide centres with assistance for their initial planning. These documents are helpful in initial meetings with staff and managers when looking for an overview of requirements, but further detail can be found in the actual handbook. Next slide, please. To assist with planning or your own centre planning, we have an adaptable delivery planner. Many of you will have seen this in our initial foundation webinars. It's an editable document to support planning and delivery of the qualification. So if you were on those webinars, you will have done a little activity looking at using these documents. If not, it's worth going onto the website, download the adaptable delivery planner and see how it works for you in the delivery of your foundation qualification. Next slide, please. To support with CPD, we will be releasing a quarterly newsletter with links to various opportunities to engage with learning experiences. These may be links to dedicated videos or manufacturers' instructions or manufacturers' updates, news, etc. So there's various things we're looking to put on these quarterly newsletters. Next slide, please. We have a completely new suite of tutor resources, as you can see on this slide. These have been offered for review and include typical support materials such as presentations and question papers. We're also creating a resource section on the Skills for Wales website to collate learning resources from third parties such as providers and centres. We will also link to relevant courses from trade and industry bodies such as CITB, the NIC and various industry boards who support with e-learning type information and support. Now we'll look at the textbook. So here we can see the new Foundation Level 2 textbook from Hodder Education, which Ian mentioned earlier. This is a dedicated foundation book created to support delivery and learning. There is a sample chapter which can be accessed through the link on the slide. Some of the most helpful sections are the parts covering the knowledge tests, preparation for assessment. Those type of things are really useful, particularly when you're running the course for the first year. In addition, Hodder are creating a free mapping documents into the current textbooks, so they can be used with the new suite of qualifications. So if you have current textbooks from various trade areas, this document will link current or the new qualifications to the learning in those textbooks to save you having to purchase new textbooks. Now we'll have a look at some of the next steps. So we'll start with the transition arrangements. During January, Qualification Wales held 2 webinars to go through the transition arrangements. The recording of these webinars are available on the Qualifications Wales website. Due to the current pandemic, further discussions are also taking place between Qualification Wales and providers to discuss the transition arrangements further, so we may see some additional alternatives. But let's have a look at 3 of the current examples highlighted here. The first example is a learner who is currently working towards a broad level 1 qualification, such as the 6219 construction skills, and then they continue as a full-time learner and they will progress onto the foundation qualification. In the second example, this is a learner who has covered a trade-specific level 1 qualification and again continues as a full-time learner and will progress onto either the foundation level 2 or the progression level 2 qualification. And finally, in example 3, a learner completes a trade-specific level 1 qualification and starts an apprenticeship. They would then commence on the level 3 qualification. There is, as we speak, and as we've just mentioned, discussions taking place between colleges and Qualification Wales regarding these transition arrangements. It is, however, expected at this moment in time that any new entrants commencing within the sector in September 21 will be registered onto the new suite of qualifications. But there's more updates to follow within the next few weeks, around a fortnight, I believe. We should know more around that. Now let's have a look at some of the timelines. Moving towards or through 2021, we've set timelines. I'd like to go through a number of these milestones. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we are having to continue with webinars for the current sessions. We are currently planning for the progression and apprenticeship webinars to commence probably around April, May, following the same pattern as we have for the foundation. But please look out for updates regarding this, because we're working with providers and Qualification Wales to get the timing right alongside the information that we'll hopefully learn in the next few weeks. But we are now open for the Foundation Qualification Centre approvals. So there are details on the website, and there's further details being added each day. The window for approval for the progression apprenticeships is around May and June. In addition, we will be providing opportunities by running training and assessment webinars in spring, with additional sessions hopefully when face-to-face sessions can resume. Please see on the slide there are various other dates and milestones. We are continually monitoring the situation and the milestones, and we'll keep you updated throughout our as we work through that, and we'll use various comms to communicate that with you. So that pretty much concludes the presentation. Thanks very much for listening. We will now take a few moments. We'll have a look through your questions, your thoughts, any feedback, any positive feedback, anything you like, anything you've got concerns over. Please put your thoughts down. We'll just discuss them as a group, and we'll answer as much as we can. But we'll just pause for a few brief moments while we review any details that may have been typed in. Just looking now, there's no questions yet. So I just want to check first of all that you're aware of how to use the questions tab to ask those questions. If you know where it is or you understand it, if you could just, or one or two of you just type in the yes, so we know that it's actually working. We have had it in some others where people have been typing questions and it's not come through to us, so we just want to make sure that that isn't happening. So if you can just type in on the right hand side, that's a relief. Thank you. Someone's typed in that it is accessible and working. I've also got the chat tab, so you can put any thoughts down in there. In the chat tab, if you have a look at that, you'll also see that we've put in the survey. So it's really important, the survey, not just for us to get an angle of how it's working for you, but it's your opportunity to share your thoughts. Some of the survey questions are just tick boxes, asking you your understanding where you are with how comfortable you are living this September. But there's also opportunities to type in. So you can type in certain things that you may think is good, some things that you're concerned about, some feedback. So please do take a look at that survey. What I'll do is I'll also drop it in now as a reply to the latest question. So you can just copy that URL and drop it into your search engine and complete that survey. You can be completing it now as we're finishing off this webinar. But please take this opportunity to ask any questions you might have.
Also, David, just a quick reminder to people that what we've done for the foundation, once we have the progression and the level 3 qualifications ready, we'll be following exactly the same format again. So we'll be doing like an introduction to the progression, and then we'll be following it through with trade specific like we've done this time, and same again for the level 3. So we're making sure that we provide you with the support that you may require to bring you along this journey.
Yeah, it's a good point, Ian. I suppose we're planning the additional sessions, which are more traditional CPD session on preparation for assessment and how to mark the work, how to use the paperwork. Do you see them working better face-to-face or webinars or a combination of both? Let's just have a think about what you like in terms of support for providing these qualifications. We've had various questions in other webinars, lots of questions around the general foundation, how it works around the units. So I suppose I could put that question to you, Ian, around the core units in the foundation and the content, and just some overview of the content and the delivery for those, and the assessment method for those in the exam.
Yeah, it's a good question, to be honest, David. But what we've got is we've got the 6 core units. We've gone through the unit numbers, and the GLH will identify the depth and the breadth that you've got to go into each particular unit as well to build that along. The units are no different. You may have some additional topics in the units that you may be thinking, well, I've never delivered them before, but it's not too new to us. We've done these various things before, like emerging technologies, and when you're looking at highways and roads, it's actually built into it. It's just the terminology that's included within that. But then when it comes to the method of assessment, it's the multiple choice online test that encompasses all the core unit numbers. And so you've got the 6 core units. So if you're like I've mentioned previously, if you're an apprentice or you've been successful in gaining employment, the foundation, which is a full-time course, both students go down exactly the same route. So they both are taught the same units to be able to bring that along. And then, of course, once they've completed the core knowledge test, which is a multiple choice test online, various types of questions. It's just to give it a variation and a flavour compared to what we've been used to previously. But it's like anything, it's always about getting the learner ready, preparing for the assessments, whether it's a multiple choice online exam or whether it's the project. And that's something as well, we'll be bringing you along that journey. And what we're trying to do at the moment is just bring little snippets of information to you. So we're covering the foundation now, we've covered the trade specific one, what's included within that, and then we'll be moving forward then with the progression, the level 3 qualification, and also the teaching and learning and the support that goes with the guided discussion as well as, so you can encompass all that. Because there is an health and safety, not specifically health and safety, but it covers majority of the health and safety, one of the units as well, which you saw. That's why them questions will be built into the core test, and the health and safety test that I mentioned previously is independent to that, because it's not part of the qualification, but it's to help learners gain a CSCS card, so they're partway there to gaining that, which is then obviously allowing them to be portable to move across to other regions, etc.
Thanks, Ian. It's a good point actually about the health and safety. There's been some confusion about that. Health and safety is still assessed in this qualification through the core assessment, but it's assessed alongside all the core units in the foundation. So it is still assessed, and also in the project, learners have to demonstrate they're working safely throughout that project and throughout the practical. So it's still a consideration during that assessment as well. So it's not that it's not assessed just because learners may take a separate assessment for a CSCS card. Yeah.
And before we go any further, I must apologise, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I got a tickle in the throat, and unfortunately the frog wouldn't come out, so I do apologise.
That's fine, Ian. It happens when we're presenting. I'm sure everyone understands. But what we'll do, have a think of any further questions. Please type them out if you have them. We won't keep everyone online if there's no questions coming in. We do have 2 slides left. Should we move on to those, Ian? Those final couple of slides?
Yes, definitely, David. And then we can still leave it open for questions, can't we? So I'll go to the next slides.
So the next slide really is just requesting your feedback. I know I mentioned that just earlier, but the survey and the feedback is so valuable for us. It's also documented when it comes through in the survey. We collate all those comments and then we bring them up in our internal meetings with the consortium, which is EAL as well, and with Qualification Wales. And they inform our changes and our support moving forward. So please do take just a few moments to fill out that survey and that feedback. We do appreciate your time with that. And on the final side, it's really just it's a big thank you really from ourselves and our colleagues across the consortium and at Qualification Wales to say thanks for your support with this. You've been attending the webinars in good numbers, showing good feedback up until now, which has helped inform many of the decisions we've taken moving forward with the product and continue to do so. So we do appreciate that. So it's a big thank you for attending today, taking time out your busy days, which we know are very busy at the moment in these COVID times. If you think of questions after today that you think, I know what it's like, crikey, 20 minutes later, I've thought of a really good question and I didn't ask it at the time. There's a good email address there, skillsforwales.customer@sittingills.com. Please email across to that, but also include myself and Ian, and we'll continue to support. But that's a really good email to make a note of. So,
David. Got one question, David. Will delegates receive the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, that's part of the follow-up. That's not come up for me, that question. That's why it's good to have 2 of us on here. Sometimes they don't come through for some reason. But yes, there'll be a follow-up email. This is recorded as well, and this is then held on the Skills for Wales website along with all the other webinars and all the documentation. So there will be access to this information. The Skills for Wales website is a really useful website. It has all the documents for assessments. The handbook is on there, all the previous recordings, any PowerPoint site lists that are useful for providers are all hosted on there. So what I can do as a reply to that question, right, saying the link to the survey isn't working. It will come out on an email as well. Normally comes out on an email about 45 minutes after the session starts, so it may have dropped into your email box already. But as a reply, I'll copy with the link to the Skills for Wales website, and that's where all the information is held. So is that sending? It's playing up a bit for me today. I don't know whether that's sent. I might have done now. I'll try those links again for the survey. We'll see if I just do the link itself, it may be easier.
While you're doing that, David, can I just remind people that we do have focus groups as well, and we've got one on the roofing as well. So if anybody would like to join the focus group, it's specifically for the roofing occupations. Just drop us an email. They're normally on a monthly basis, and it's just lasts for 1 hour. All right. And we do have a number of employers on there as well. We normally have 2 or 3 employers on there, so you'll be able to listen to what they have to say as well as. So they're always good, and it's a good way of gaining up-to-date information, and it also helps us then to share with you for any consultation as well that we'd like to send out to you as well as. So you're more than happy to join if you'd like to. There's a question now, David.
We've got a question come in, Ian, if I can put that to you.
Yeah, please.
One of the main issues I can see with the practical projects is the space centres will need to house multiple groups working on the same large rigs, as a current qualification uses multiple smaller assessments?
I think that the main thing we've got to consider here is like anything, it's all about the planning element of it, and it's crucial that this is planned accordingly. The size of the rigs, of the jigs I should say, for the roofing has been taken into consideration by employers as well as colleges like yourselves, to be able to offer this nature of the project moving forward. It is under controlled environment, we're fully aware of that, and I suppose at time, depending on how many learners that you're going to have to go through this, like we've said earlier, you're going to have to plan that accordingly. But it has been taken into consideration, the sizes, and when you look at the actual size of the project that's got to be carried out for the roofing occupations, the feedback we've been getting is that it is the right size for the type of learners, and there should be adequate space for that. But if people have got concerns, all right, by all means, please just drop us an email. But once the project is set, because this is an example that we've shown you today, that's what the learners will be able to work with. And it's got to try and be as realistic as it can possibly be, working with the natural sizes of the slates or the tiles, the concrete tiles, putting the lattice and the felt on, and putting the verges on and things like that. So it's making sure that they get a realistic project out of it, so they can test the skills element with that. And let's also bear in mind that each project, practical project, accumulates 20 hours because you've got the planning, the doing, and the doing is 20 hours per trade area that they've got to do, which totals to 40 hours. Okay, so I can understand your concerns, but I think once you actually have a good look at the project and you go through the project, the feedback we've been getting from centres is that they are comfortable, slightly concerned, yes, but they are comfortable with it, and they understand that this is new. So obviously what's gone off previously, people have got to start planning for this to be able to move forward with it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I've just typed out a sort of a small answer to that as well. It is a change to current unitised approaches and does take different planning. It's almost starting at looking at your delivery planner, seeing the final weeks and working backwards from that to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to take the practical assessments required. And that would, excuse me, must be catching, Ian. That'll probably be dependent on the facilities you have, the number of rigs you have, the number of learners that are going through. Are some learners quite gifted and they're working through and they're quite advanced? Are those advanced learners able to take the practical a little bit sooner, which will free up a little bit of time later on for some learners who are taking the full duration? I suppose it's difficult to say without sitting down, having a look at it and looking at your own facilities. And that's why we've been trying to promote in these webinars, really, a lot more internal meetings with staff, with managers looking at facilities. I think it'll really pay off. The providers who spend a bit of time with the documentation, all getting together in a workshop, all the staff getting the documentation out, the planners, and having a think about how it will actually work. We've got a lot of support material. We'll have various different support material, but you need to then work with that, don't you, and have a look at your business that works for you. It'll only do so much as a product itself, so you're the ones who apply that and implement it. So that's what we've been really encouraging. Try and get everyone together, probably in a workshop with all the documents in front of you, and try and figure it out. I hope that's helped. I see a couple of people have left. That often happens as we get towards the end, particularly if there's no questions. If there are any questions, please do type them in. Ian and I will stay on for a little bit longer. But if there's no other questions coming in, if you've got other meetings or lessons to go to, just once again, thanks very much for your attendance. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a nice evening and stay safe. Thank you very much from all of us.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen, for attending. And like David says, please be safe, and we trust you've enjoyed the webinar. And please, your feedback is valuable to us. So thank you for everything.